Very briefly, collagen is a type of protein that is fibrous in nature, with a role of connecting and supporting bodily tissues such as muscle tendons and cartilage. The major function of the Golgi tendon is to sense muscle tension when a muscle is contracted, sending signals to the brain about how much force is being exerted and where. The Golgi tendon sends this information to the central nervous system as a way of concerning the strength of a muscular contraction, and together with muscle spindles, they facilitate and allow for smooth movement patterns of the different muscles used during steady-state exercise. So now we're going to move on to talking a bit more about hypothesis and my method of the test that I completed. However, first I'm just going to run through the 3 different types of hypotheses you could potentially use. So a null hypothesis is a hypothesis when there is no significant difference between the specified populations. Any observed differences are due to sampling or experimental error. A two-tailed hypothesis is a statistical hypothesis where the region of rejection is on both sides of the sampling distribution. And finally, a single-tailed hypothesis is a statistical test in which the critical area of distribution is one-sided, so that it is either greater than or less than a certain value, but not both. So now I'm going to go on to talk about the method and the hypothesis of the steady-state exercise I completed. So before we completed the test, we measured the client's resting heart rate, blood pressure, O2 saturation, breathing rate, and also blood lactate. So this was a way of being able to compare and analyze how much it increased from being at rest to when steady-state exercise starts. The actual test involved the client working submaximally, which is between 70 to 80% of their maximal heart rate, for 20 minutes on an exercise bike. Throughout the test, we measured the client's heart rate, O2 saturation, blood pressure, and breathing rate every 2 minutes. This allowed us to compare how the client's body systems changed in comparison to the hypothesis. Moreover, we measured their blood lactate every 6 minutes and also regularly checked their rate of perceived exertion in relation to the Borg scale. So this is how hard they feel like they're working. Finally, we measured the client's post 1 and 2 minutes breathing rate, heart rate, O2 saturation, blood pressure, and we also took 1 blood lactate sample at post 2 minutes. So our hypothesis going into this was that the body's systems, so the cardiovascular system and the respiratory system, will initially increase. So heart rate and breathing rate will initially increase, but then at 3 to 4 minutes into exercise, we should see a plateau, which will remain throughout the rest of steady-state exercise, and then it should drop back to resting quite significantly. And also, we predicted that the energy system that we used is the aerobic glycolysis system, due to the fact that steady-state exercise is long continuous exercise, and the aerobic glycolysis system is structured in a way to suit long continuous exercise. So in this part of the presentation, I'm just going to go through the results from the test that I got from the 3 participants. So for Max's heart rate, we can see that there was an obvious increase in heart rate across the first 5 minutes. This is expected at the start of some maximal exercise, due to there always being a rise in heart rate when exercise begins. However, after the first 4 minutes of exercise, his heart rate still began to rise, which is clearly shown on the graph, from his heart rate rising from 108 beats per minute at 4 minutes up to 186 beats per minute at 6 minutes in. 186 beats per minute is well over submaximal training zone, and also in comparison to normative data at 4 minute mark, we should be seeing a plateau of heart rate and not a sudden rise of heart rate. For the following 4 minutes of exercise, Max's heart rate plateaus, which is shown by the line graph leveling off. For this 4 minutes of exercise, Max is still working at around 187 beats per minute, which is still well over his submaximal training zone. At 10 minutes, Max's heart rate finally drops down into his submaximal training zone at around 170 beats per minute. and this has remained relatively consistently for the rest of exercise. It doesn't go above 173 beats per minute for the remaining 10 minutes. And finally, his heart rate begins to drop back down quite quickly during post 1 and 2 of exercising, dropping down to 142 after 1 minute of not exercising, which is what we should see during steady state exercise. Throughout the first 4 to 6 minutes of Summer's heart rate increases steadily from resting at 75 beats per minute up to 147 beats per minute. In comparison to normative data, this is what's expected to happen initially during steady state exercise. However, instead of plateauing and remaining at 174 beats per minute, which is considered as her submaximal training zone, from 6 to 10 minutes, her heart rate increases up to 183 beats per minute. As a result of this, she is evidently told to slow down, because at 12 minutes it returns back down to 174 and doesn't increase much higher than this for the rest of exercise, apart from one random jump up to 189 beats per minute at 16 minutes, which is clearly shown on the graph. And then also at the end of exercise, we can clearly see Summer's heart rate is decreasing. It's not as dramatic as Max's, but we can see that decrease in heart rate, which is what we should see after exercise is finished. So finally then, if we look at Josh's heart rate, Josh's heart rate throughout the exercise is a constant anomaly. One reason to show this is from his resting heart rate being at 105 beats per minute. So for the rest of exercise, at the start of exercise, his heart rate actually drops, and then actually for the rest of exercise, his heart rate is constantly on the increase. So for Josh's heart rate, from what I can see, his data was probably calculated wrong or measured wrong, which causes this anomaly in the data. So we're now going to look at O2 saturation. So during steady state exercise, O2 saturation should remain constant throughout the duration of exercise. Normative data states that O2 saturation should start at 98 to 99% and should remain that high feeling level. Both Summer and Josh work with an O2 saturation which doesn't drop below 97% across the whole 20 minutes, which is what expected during steady state exercise. Max, on the other hand, experiences 3 unexpected drops in O2 saturation, dropping all the way down to 83% at 12 minutes. Due to it dropping down so low and then rising back up to 97% within 2 minutes, it clearly shows that this must be an anomaly in the data as well. So now going and looking onto breathing rate. So during steady state exercise, breathing rate should always increase at the start and then plateau throughout the remainder of exercise and then drop down to resting breathing rate quite quickly. All participants have an initial increase in breathing rate due to the start of exercise. Some participants higher than other. For example, after 6 minutes, Max's heart rate is at 42 breaths per minute, whereas Summer's and Josh's are a lot lower down at 29 and 26 breaths per minute. This can clearly show that Max is working way too hard in comparison to the 2 other participants because his breathing rate is significantly higher. Normative data states that breathing rate should plateau at around 5 minutes in exercise due to the body system reaching the demands of exercise, which is clearly shown by all 3 participants show a plateau in breathing rate, but obviously Max's is just significantly higher than the others due to him working a lot harder. So finally then, before we go on to some more in-depth analysis, just going to look at RPE, so rate of perceived exertion. Data is how hard the athletes feel they're working during the exercise. So as you can see, for Josh and Summer, we don't have some readings, but for Max, we can see that he's working at around the rating of 14. It goes up to a height of 16, and then decreases for the rest of exercise. So if we think back to his heart rate data, the reason why there's a big increase of his heart rate data at around 4 minutes in is due to him feeling like he's working a lot harder than he should do, because the normative data for rate of perceived exertion steady state exercise states that you should be working at around a rate of 10, which Max clearly isn't. But what's actually interesting is if we look at Summer's RPE is really high throughout all of exercise, but then if we look at her breathing rate, O2 saturation and heart rate, it matches normative data the best. So she obviously feels like she was working a lot harder than some of her data represents. And then finally, Josh is in the first 12 minutes, he's kind of working at the right level he should be, or he feels he should be. But then towards the end, it actually rises up above 15 and then to 16, which we shouldn't be seeing. So now we're going to do some cardiovascular system analysis. So throughout the test, we had numerous devices on the client that measured heart rate, these being a heart rate watch, a blood pressure monitor, and also the oximeter produced a heart rate reading as well as O2 saturation. The most reliable device that we took our heart rate readings from was the heart rate watch, and we took a heart rate reading every 2 minutes as a way of measuring whether the participants were working submaximally. So the normative data for heart rate during steady state exercise suggests that during the first 4 minutes there will be a steady incline of heart rate, but from then on it should plateau for the remainder of the exercise. For the initial stage of steady state exercise, both Max and Summer's data mirror the normative data. However, Josh's data shows an initial decrease in heart rate due to the fact that his resting heart rate before the test was measured at 105 beats per minute. Having a resting heart rate of 105 beats per minute is obviously extremely high, therefore meaning that there must be a reason for it being so high before the test was completed. Anticipatory rise does cause an increase in heart rate, which could be a slight factor, but it doesn't make it high. It doesn't make it increase to that extremity. I believe that the reason why Josh's heart rate started so high was because his warm-up was completed at too high of an intensity. That means that when it actually came to completing the steady state exercise, his heart rate actually decreased due to it being at a lower intensity than his warm-up. So when he started steady state exercise, he was working at a lower intensity to what his warm-up was.